Houses were so cheap in 2000. When I see what my neighbors paid on Zillow, some who have bought their homes in 2000 or 2002, it makes me cry. So much house for no money. Why? Why can't things just go back to how it was? I graduated in 2009 and they were basically giving away houses in my area. I had zero money, so it would have been a silly time for me to buy, but if I had a time machine I could scrape together enough for a little house, rent it out, and now it would be worth $600,000. Oh well. I can't help but look back at my younger self in disappointment. I should have gotten a job and bought my dream house back then instead of wasting time going to elementary school. What was I thinking? And Krispy Kreme was $3 dozen, now $13.99 does. Don't just save money, put your money to work or it'll constantly be losing value. I am 100% confident someone in 2000 said the exact same thing about prices 20-30 years prior. Albeit not on Zillow. Not 2000, but my next door neighbor built his home in 1969 for $12,000 cash. It's now worth almost $700K. It doesn't feel like it sometimes, but 2000 was a long fucking time ago. Don't look at the second half of 2008. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. In 2000, I was making $60K a year plus bonus, to $80K total, as a mid-career engineer at Microsoft, and the cheapest house in my area of Seattle was $400K Queen Anne. Today, a cheapish house is 1.5 meters, and a mid-career engineer is making $250K-ish. And in 2000 people were crying about how cheap houses were in 1977, and in 2046 people will be crying about how cheap houses were in 2023. Houses were so cheap during the Great Depression. You should see the price of my great-great-great-grandpa's house from 1800. I just wanted to play Pokemon in 2000. We bought our first house in 1999. Had to move out of Nova to the Midwest to do so. We could barely afford to do it even then. We both finally had jobs that paid professional wages. For context, mine came out to $12 an hour and houses had been going up for the last 5 years. They would crash a bit after the dot-com bust, but went up again immediately. We felt lucky to get the low rate of 7.4. Everyone wishes they had just been able to buy X number of years ago. Don't forget to adjust for inflation. That $1 in 2000 is equivalent to $1.77 in today's dollars. Yes, houses cost a lot less then, but I know I was also making a lot less then, as well. I suspect that may be the case for many others, too. When I started driving in the 80s, gas was 85 cents a gallon. That ain't happening again either. Money was hard to come by back then. $4.15 minimum wage. $30,000 a year was a decent income. But houses are stupid high, I agree. No matter what you are doing, it doesn't generally help to compare yourself to others. Compare yourself to yourself. Are you doing better than you were 10 years ago? Why or why not? I'm doing better in some ways, because I have a lovely house, with 2 bathrooms and a dishwasher, after living 40 years with 1 bathroom and 0 dishwashers, but my genetic condition has deteriorated to the point where I am in pain 24/7 and some days can hardly get out of bed. I sold my Seattle house for asking price in February. Toso go me, smiley face. It's interesting watching people who start to understand how markets work. They were even cheaper in 1970. Practically free even longer in history if you can build one out of sticks and stones. In the year 2040, you're gonna look back at 2020 and think the same thing. Do you have any doubts about this? You shouldn't. At one point in time, $100K seemed like a ridiculous amount of money to pay for a house in America's largest and most economically strong cities. Consider this $1 million doesn't seem ridiculous anymore in those areas: NYC, SF, LA, Boston, DC. Check again in 23 years. You'll think the same thing. Houses were so cheap in 1977. When I saw how much homes and land cost in 1977, I thought it was crazy. I should have bought it all back then, but I wasn't born yet. It will probably be the same way in 2040, looking back at prices today, if inflation and immigration continues in the same way that it has been. Assuming that the system can survive that long. In 2044 we're all going to say how cheap housing was in 2023. I bought my present house in 2005 for $145,000 and by 2008 it was worth $80,000. Many times I should have let the bank have it, but I persevered, and by 2017 it was finally close in value to the pre-crash value. Now it's worth $210,000. I wish I had the money to buy one of the many foreclosures on my street in 2008-2012 for $80,000. Wages were a lot less on the whole and the entire IT sector was just starting, so there were much fewer people pulling in $200K salaries then. And in 1980 houses were so much cheaper than 2000. In 1960 houses were so much cheaper than in 1980. In 1940 houses were so much cheaper than in 1960. In 1910 you could get a house for $5,000. What is your point? Yes, houses are cheaper 20 years ago at all times. You can have my house if you can make me 20 years younger. Remember when healthcare was affordable in 2000, so cheap compared to now? Because the elites are cunts. It's worse than that. We purchased our home for $400,000 in 2012, Zillow claims $800,000 now. And comps in the area support that price. Doubling in value in 10 years? That's absolutely absurd. Inflation alone is important though. The dollar had an average inflation rate of 2.50 per year between 2000 and today, producing a cumulative price increase of 76.61. This means that today's prices are 1.77 times as high as average prices since 2000, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Price Index. So yay, things were cheaper, but salaries were also lower. And 2000 was starting to show signs of the ultimate 2001 recession. Literally a quarter century ago. Are you 14? What do you think people will be saying about current prices in the year 2046? Blame your government, yes, both sides for fucking things up, they did it on purpose. People in 2000 were looking back at the 80s saying the same thing. They also made a lot less. My parents supported a family of 5 on $70,000 a year in a whole area. My wife and I combined make almost double that in the same area and wouldn't be able to support a family that big. Salaries were lower in 2000 also, don't forget that part. What you're seeing is the devaluation of the dollar. The more there is of something, the less valuable it becomes. Wait till you find out what they sold for in the early 90s. You could not afford the house then because you would not have had a job. No point in getting sour grapes over it. It's not like the housing market is predictable. If we are using hindsight and a time machine to feed our regrets, there's a bunch of other stocks and cryptocurrencies you could have bought in 2000 that would be worth way more now than a house in the Bay Area. I made $7 an hour in 2002. I was 19 in 2000, living in the NYC suburbs. No one made six figures then. Only C-suite, doctors, lawyers, finance. Now, almost everyone in a corporate job with 5 years experience makes six figures. The starting salary at my company is $65,000. In 2000 it was something like $20,000. Wage growth is directly related to inflation as are home prices.